One of the most beloved aspects of Steven Universe is fusion. While not entirely unique to the series, I mean, come on, Dragon Ball's right there, there's no denying that Steven Universe tackled this concept in a pretty refreshing way. Whereas Dragon Ball's rules allow for fusion to be performed by practically any character through various means, such as the Pata Rings or Fusion Dance, Steven Universe plays the game a little differently by gatekeeping fusion to gem kind. Steven acts as a living loophole, existing as a half-human, half-gem hybrid, not only enabling fusion between himself and other gems, but also humans such as his dad Greg or girlfriend Connie. But beyond that, another area where fusion really shines in Steven Universe is in their design philosophy, which in itself seemed to be an extension of its world building. The look of fusions weren't just following the rule of cool. I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of them are very cool, but their appearance, weapons, and behavior are a direct result of their components. Sardonyx and Sugilite are gigantic in size as a result of their larger-than-life personalities. But the two couldn't be any more different in basically every aspect, despite Ruby and Sapphire making 2/3 of both fusions. And that's because, with Sardonyx, Pearl complements both Ruby and Sapphire. All Pearls are consistently portrayed as theatrical, to say the least, and that flair for the dramatic is amplified by the eternal flame that is Ruby's passion. But it's all reined in by Pearl and Sapphire's often reserved demeanors. Toss in the fact that Pearl's mind is an intergalactic encyclopedia, alongside Sapphire's ability to see to the future, and you get a 20-foot tall showman who could probably do a better job at late-night television than most hosts right now. On the other hand, with Sugilite, who the show establishes is an unstable fusion, Amethyst, at that point in the series, was only compatible with Ruby, really. Whereas Ruby could really need to take a chill pill, which Sapphire's presence provides, Amethyst is the chill pill. But unlike Sapphire, that doesn't stop Amethyst from being impulsive and rowdy. And that amplifies those very same qualities in Ruby. They were both created to be warriors after all. This causes Sapphire to get kinda, I don't want to say overruled in the fusion, since Sugilite does retain some of Garnet's qualities, meaning she retains some of Sapphire's by extension, but Sapphire does get the short end of the stick compared to the other two. To directly quote what Garnet has to say about Sugilite in the book Guide to the Crystal Gems, Amethyst can be a bit reckless and I can be a bit brash. At times we can both get carried away, especially if we're egging each other on. Together, we become Sugilite, an inhibited powerhouse with nothing to prove and everything to show off. Amethyst's lack of inhibition and my raw power makes Sugilite so fun to be that it's hard to want to separate once we form her. You get the idea. I could honestly spend 20 minutes gushing over how clever each and every fusion in the show is. Even though Rainbow 2.0 could have looked cooler. But the point I'm trying to make is, fusions are cool, and I wish we got to see more of them in the show. So, we made more, nigga! Teaming up with one of the MVPs of Roundtable Steven Universe artwork, Coda, we banded together, brainstormed, and delivered 5 brand new fusions. Don't get me wrong though, he drew them and did like the hard part. I was just the idea guy, you know? So we'll go through each fusion one by one, breaking down the basic idea behind the fusions and their appearance. And if you guys end up liking this video, we'll do a part 2. Probably. I've said I've wanted to make a lot of follow-up videos over the last few years, but I'm gonna try to be more consistent going forward. But I also want to run like 2 other channels on top of this, so no promises. Hey, wait, what's up? Kicking things off, Coda and I explored a variation of fusion that I really wanted to see pop up in the show at some point, and that's a 3-character fusion between Steven, a gem, and a human. Specifically Pearl and Greg. I'm sure there's a crystal clear on this theory somewhere on the channel, but if Steven is able to fuse with both humans and the crystal gems, then it should be feasible for him to hold down a fusion that encompasses both parties. Humans' inability to fuse is portrayed as a barrier between mankind and gems in the episode We Need to Talk, where Pearl dangled the fact that Greg can't fuse over his head. That no matter what, Greg can't connect with Rose in this way, a way that's just natural to other gems. Of course, that episode made it clear that Greg and Rose don't need to fuse in order to have a strong connection with one another, and they can achieve a similar level of intimacy just by talking and enjoying each other's company. And after everything Greg and Pearl have been through, it'd be nice for the two to experience fusion through the same person that bridged them together and brought them to a mutual understanding and healing in the first place. Steven! Of course, Greg would ultimately fuse with his son in Steven Universe the movie, giving us Steg Multiverse, who's pretty divisive among fans for how he's depicted, and while I like Steg, I totally get why someone would be put off by him, but even if you're not a fan of Steg's look or demeanor, I think the idea behind him is something everyone can appreciate. To quote Rebecca Sugar, Steg is the ultimate ally who has all of Greg's emotional intuition and free spirit, and all of Steven's compassion. The support that Steven gets from Greg is so grounding for him, and Steg is just in a perfect position to do that for others. To just radiate support and confidence. I mentioned Steg because in figuring out the idea behind this 3-character fusion, I really wanted to cross the attributes of both Steg and Rainbow Quartz 2.0, who also exudes confidence alongside a selfless, mindful attitude. Not to mention Rainbow's based off of Mary Poppins and Dick Van Dyke. This really got me thinking, what would you get if you mix a rock star with Mary Poppins? What happens when you cross Rainbow's super speed with Steg's sick guitar skills and muscular build? And then it hit me. There's only one possible outcome. You would get Sporticus.
Don't let your kids watch it!
Hear me out, hear me out. Are you listening? I know this sounds ridiculous, but are you really going to tell me that Sporticus isn't a Steven Universe character already? Like, let's really talk about it. Let me read this man's wiki. The local hero of Lazy Town, who modestly calls himself only a slightly above average hero. I imagine Steven would say the same thing about himself. At the very least, Twitter would. He is highly athletic, as shown by his name, and does flips and jumps to do simple things, such as brushing his teeth or preparing himself a sandwich. Sporticus does flips and jumps, Pearl does flips and jumps. Sporticus is extra when brushing his teeth. Steven had a whole montage of his morning routine. Twice! Sporticus is a very understanding and modest person. He knows what he is capable of and is always worried for everyone. He's always trying to help people when he feels it's needed. He doesn't hate anyone, including Robbie Rotten, and he wants to be friends with everyone, even Robbie. He always sticks with the kids when they are playing or doing sports, and he knows what they are capable of. But he never gives up, and he always does his job. He's just like Steven for real! And is that a crystal on Sporticus? Game over, case closed, what else do you need me to say? Okay, but seriously, I do think Sporticus is a pretty good example of what a fusion between Steven, Pearl, and Greg would look like, between things like the Coach Steven persona, Pearl evidently being a volleyball coach, Steven and Rainbow super speed, their mutual optimism, and yeah, Sporty be singing. I just see this fusion having the persona of a fitness coach that wants to uplift others and push them beyond their perceived limits. I know Steven's fusions usually keep his physical clothes, but screw it. Let's say Pearl's jacket and Steven's jacket create some brand new drip. Steven's iconic shirt now sporting 3 stars to represent each component of the fusion, alongside accessories such as knee pads and bracers. We didn't discuss a weapon for the fusion, but let's say instead of an umbrella, this fusion would have Pearl's spear sandwiched in between 2 shields to create a gem barbell. Adjust Rainbow 2.0's colors to accommodate Greg's pigmentation, and boom! What should we call this fusion? Because technically the gem is still Rainbow Quartz, so we could just add a word in front of them like Turbo Rainbow Quartz. Or we could name them after a variant of Rainbow Quartz like Sunset Quartz or Aura Quartz. Or we could name them something entirely new, like Velocity or Bolt. Let me know which name you like best in the comments down below. And with that, 1 fusion down, 4 more to go. Next up is a fusion that makes sense on so many levels when it comes to both character development and world building. A fusion between 2 members of the Crystal Gem B team, Lapis Lazuli and Bismuth. Lapis and Bismuth is a duo that I didn't think much of during the original series due to their lack of interaction, but I immediately had a need to see more of these 2 interacting together after Steven Universe the movie, where they seem to be pretty buddy-buddy after the time skip. There's even some interactions in the video game Unleash the Light that can definitely get some shippers fired up. And need I remind you, the Light games are canon. Ultimately, Lapis and Bismuth didn't get to interact much in future, but that doesn't mean the argument for a fusion is shallow. Far from it. Lapis and Bismuth have a lot in common. At one point, both were imprisoned by the crystal gems, although under different circumstances. And by extension, both were plucked out of the midst of war and suddenly found themselves thousands of years in the future in relatively peaceful times, forced to adjust to a new world with new rules around people they can't put their complete trust in. Although that's more the case for Lapis than Bismuth. Both tend to live in isolation, at least when overwhelmed and deeply conflicted, as Bismuth had her forge and Lapis had the barn. Although, as a future, Bismuth has a new forge and little homeschool, and Lapis seems to reside in her own studio on campus. Both are very powerful gems in their own right, with similar methods of combat, as Bismuth can shapeshift her arms, while Lapis can shape the water around her. And neither are afraid to get their hands dirty in battle, often holding back from getting lethal thanks to Steven's influence. Not to mention in eras 1 and 2 of Homeworld, Bismuths and Lapis Lazulis are basically both construction workers. Lapis's terraform planets, while Bismuths built the actual structures on said planets. As you may or may not have known, it was confirmed years ago on the Steven Universe podcast that single gem equivalents of fusions exist on Homeworld. So I imagine a fusion between Lapis and Bismuth already exists, as a gem who deals with planets with much colder climates and much larger bodies of water than what we deal with on Earth. Like Enceladus, one of Saturn's moons that's covered in a large layer of ice, but underneath is a subsurface ocean that's estimated to be about 19 miles deep. 10 times the size of Earth's average ocean depth of 3.7 kilometers or 2.2 miles. Fun fact, Enceladus meets almost all the basic requirements we need for life, and some even believe it may host eyeless creatures that rely only on sound to navigate. And did I call these fun facts? Because they've actually been keeping me up every night for months now. What's really out there? So yeah, Lapis and Bismuth fusion. Great for an ice planet, or just building structures in an ocean, like maybe the lunar sea spire. I truly would not be surprised if their single gem equivalents already exist as a Homeworld gem for said planets. Maybe this fusion's personality would be similar to Garnet. Lapis's present-day laid-back personality kinda makes her the Sapphire, alongside being made for Blue Diamond's court, so she's naturally going to be a bit low energy. As for Bismuth, we know she can be brass and is usually pretty high energy like Ruby. They both got that dog in them. Bismuth and Lapis are also pretty blunt and know when to be serious. So yeah, personality-wise, imagine end of series Garnet, but with some snark and sass. You can have a good laugh with them, but you also know they can crack your skull open like a coconut if you get on their bad side. Bismuth and Lapis are both their own weapons rather than manifesting one themselves, so not really much else to touch on. Here's Rainbow Hematite, a crystal for peace and alignment, representing the journeys of both Lapis and Bismuth, as they reintegrate themselves into the world, become familiar with peace, and are finally aligned with the crystal gems in present day. Beautiful. I like to imagine they're a little taller than Opal in order to get some major heavy lifting done. What do you think? There's definitely a difference between really wanting to see something happen in the show and being robbed of it, but I'll die on the hill that we were absolutely robbed of a Steven and Lars fusion. Lars became one of my favorite characters in Steven Universe before the Pinkening because it became obvious to me what they were going for with his character. Lars starts out as an insecure teenager who wants the approval of his peers while constantly rejecting the things he believes are uncool and, on an unspoken level, masculine. He's embarrassed of his love for cooking. He's embarrassed to be seen hanging out with Steven. And even though he clicks with Sadie so well and clearly likes her a lot, he's constantly hot and cold with her because she doesn't meet his surface level image of a cool girlfriend. But the cool kids adore Steven. They think Sadie is one of the coolest people in Beach City, starting a band with her. And even though they never got a chance to try Lars' ube roll, I'm sure they would have thought his food was was amazing. They like everything that Lars is ashamed of. And after taking L after L, realizing his peers and even his own parents liked him better when Steven was masquerading in his own body, Lars slowly begins to get his act together. But obviously there are relapses along the way. The biggest relapse being him ditching the potluck and later letting fear get the best of him and abandoning Sadie on Aquamarine's ship. The aftermath forces Lars to admit his flaws and his fears, leading into the Wanted arc, where he faces those fears in order to protect the off-colors and receiving a literal second chance at life, introducing us to Pink Lars, who quickly becomes Captain Lars. And then the show basically got canned and they had to wrap everything up in the back half of season 5. But then Cartoon Network wanted another season, so we get a self-actualized Lars for only one episode of Future. Captain Lars was a step in the right direction for our boy, but the conclusion to his arc is blatantly missing. And much like how Amethyst's arc of coming to her own and accepting herself was capped off with the Smoky Quartz fusion, in a world where the OG Steven Universe got a season 6, Lars's arc probably would have been brought to the finish line with a fusion between himself and Steven. I think showing Lars and Steven learning to embrace everything they rejected about themselves and are ashamed of, in Steven's case, everything about being a diamond, would have been a great way for these two to connect and thus, like Amethyst and Steven, have a mutual internal conflict. From there, you just gotta put them in a situation where the external conflict calls for fusion. Honestly, given where Future left off, if the franchise ever came back, they could still execute this concept through an intergalactic road trip of sorts, given that Steven said he was going to visit Lars, and he clearly still has some baggage to sort through at the end of the miniseries. But let's talk about what this fusion would actually look like and would actually do. First off, his name is definitely Stars, not up for debate. Second, between the clear Captain Harlock influence on Lars of the Stars and the fact that Lars has had a lot in common with Lion for a bit now, I'd like to imagine that Stars definitely has beautiful, luscious anime hair, reminiscent of Lion's mane. I wanted him to still wear Lars's cape and Steven's star shirt, but Coda absolutely swagged him out with an amalgamation of the Captain Lars cape, Steven's varsity jacket, and Lars's jacket from the Future episode, Little Graduation, alongside some other cosmetic changes to their outfit that goes a long way. Now, if you were around for my Steven Universe content during season 5 and Future, you know I was itching to see Lars use his powers, as they confirmed on the podcast that anything Lion can do, Lars can do. But we never got to see that, and it crushes my soul. So I said, fuck it. Stars has a third arm that he uses to fire bingo bongo beams out of, similar to Lion's concussive roar. I think this fusion would be pretty OP, considering you're crossing the powers of Pink Diamond with the powers of Lion. I'd like to even think that Stars would have some sort of light speed dash power, similar to Minato from Naruto, or Hunter's Palsman Flapjack from the Owl House. With all that said, here's Stars. Absolutely fire. Alright, I know what you're waiting for. Let's fuse the diamonds. But only 2 of them. The diamonds fusing was something that was always a cool idea, but due to how Cross-Gem Fusion went against everything they stood for prior to Change Your Mind, it was always wishful thinking. Although it would have been cool to see Yellow and Blue fuse against White Diamond or something, Change Your Mind only had 44 minutes, and due to how things were paced up to that point, I'm kinda glad we got Gray Diamonds instead. It showed off White Diamond's powers a bit more, and a lot of people already complained that the episode crammed in too much, which I get. A lot of the moments didn't have room to breathe. But also, they thought this and the movie would have been all there was for Steven Universe when making it. So I'm still content with how Change Your Mind came out. All of this being said, when approaching the design for Green Diamond, we wanted her to feel like a fusion that would have come into existence during Era 3. A fusion that doesn't exist to serve a practical purpose, but exists simply because they want to exist. Thus, I don't envision Green Diamond as a super crazy anime warrior. Instead, I think she would look very casual. Still about her business, but casual. Business casual. Now, what I think would be really cool about Green Diamond is that Yellow's ability to alter a gem's form and Blue's ability to alter a gem's mood would result in a pretty insane ability. Gems can already shapeshift, so when struck by Green Diamond's aura, what if gems transformed into something that reflects their personality or even mental state? Similar, but not exact, to how Steven transformed into a giant kaiju. For example, if you have a gem Sona, maybe they they be transformed into whatever animal your zodiac sign is. Mine would be a scorpion, which, depending on the size, could be pretty sick. Of course, you need the diamonds to turn you back, but that shouldn't be much of an issue since they're happy to help all gems in this new era. And for the final results, nice. Last but certainly not least, Bismuth and Pearl. Do I even have to explain it? Bismuth clearly has a thing for Pearl, and although Pearl seems to be a little oblivious, I'm sure if she knew, those feelings would be reciprocated. Unless Lapis makes a move, in that case, Pearl's gonna be bumping the Steve Lacey. So of course, picking them for this video was an absolute no-brainer. Pearl and Bismuth obviously have endured a lot when it comes to Rose Quartz and Pink Diamond, so this fusion could represent both of them moving forward from that chapter of their lives while learning to believe in love again. A self-assured fusion that can literally see through deception, as I'm giving them the ability to sense the intentions of others. But why? How? Well, think of Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and how she can sense the vibrations of someone's heartbeat and breathing patterns in order to determine if they're lying, with Azula being the only foe who was able to circumvent this tactic. In general, I think this fusion could have some earthbending-esque powers, considering Pearl has the ability to manipulate sand, we just only saw it once. On top of Bismuth's resistance to lava, and the fact that Bismuths in real life are a metal. Not to mention Bismuth has only been shown to use a small number of abilities, compared to Pearl's widely extensive moveset, so we're gonna have to get creative to give this fusion the sauce it deserves. I think my favorite detail of this fusion that Koda and I settled on are the colors of her hair. Bismuth has her iconic rainbow locks, and Pearl's hair has been different shades of pink over the years, resulting in this fusion having pink monochromatic locks. And here we go. Ain't she a beaut? So like, while scripting this video, I just realized that we went with rainbow hematite with both the Bismuth and Lapis fusion and the Bismuth and Pearl fusion. So oops. Because of this little goof, I'll actually let you guys decide what to name this one in the comments down below, declaring her official, unofficial name on a community post. So keep your eyes peeled. Once again, I want to give a big shout out to the wonderful Art with Coda for illustrating all the dope fusions you saw in this video, and I would love to bring him back on, maybe even alongside other artists for a part 2 of sorts. Be sure to give him a follow on his Instagram over at Art with Coda. Oh, and with Twitter imploding, be sure to follow me on Instagram at OstrikVox. I'm beyond satisfied with how this video came out. It was a blast to jump back into the world of Steven Universe again, and if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to throw it a like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more cartoon content. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. Until next time, peace!